Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the Council Chambers here via live streaming on the 22nd of June 2021, under different terms to what we had our last meeting. So, ladies and gentlemen, this public meeting is being recorded to improve access to the meeting for our community. The recording will be published and will be retained by Council in accordance with Council's legal obligations. If you submitted a question, your name and question will be recorded. We will constantly be live streaming. If the live streaming does stop for any reasons, we will stop the meeting until the live streaming has been restarted. I wish to begin by acknowledging the Bangarang people as our traditional landowners on the land on which we are meeting here today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and also respect to any other First Nation people that may be present. We please stand for the prayer. Almighty God, we humbly ask Thee to bless and guide this council in its deliberation so that we may truly preserve the welfare of the people for whom we serve. Amen. Thank you, everybody. We will get started with the main part of our contents of the meeting tonight. And I will move to order of business item number 7, and it's the confirmation of the minutes from our previous meeting at the end of May. Could I please have a mover for the confirmation of the minutes? Councillor Benton and Councillor Fuller. Would anybody like to talk on the minutes or any changes? No. All those in favour? The recommendation is moved. There is, speaking to our councillors, no conflicts of interest on any reports here tonight. And I'll move straight into councillor reports and skip to item 13, which is community wellbeing, and I'll hand over to Director Jamie Chubb to report. Thank you, Jamie. 13.1, community committees, community asset and community nominations.
Thank you. So this report is presented to Council to endorse some new members for some of our community asset committees. So these committees actually help Council and work closely within their own communities to look after community assets. We had a call for nominations for the Millawa Hall and Park, the Moyu Soldiers Memorial Hall, the Myrie Soldiers Memorial Hall, the North Wangaratta Sports Reserve and the Oxley Shire Hall. We also had some additional nominations for the Eldorado Memorial Hall and the Bowman's Mamunji Memorial Hall. So the recommendation before Council tonight is that Council appoints the recommended nominees to the following community asset committees: Bowman's Mamunji Memorial Hall, Eldorado Memorial Hall, North Wangaratta Sports Reserve, the Millawa Public Hall and Park, the Moyu Memorial Hall, Myrie Memorial Hall and Oxley Shire Hall.
Thank you, Director Chubb. There's no public questions on this issue. Can I please have a mover to move Councillor Bussell and a seconder? Councillor Benton. Councillor Bussell, would you like to talk to the recommendation?
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. I would love to talk to this recommendation. Firstly, I'd like to thank the locals that volunteer for these asset committees and look after them as if they own them themselves. And so I want to thank them again for their hard work. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Bussell. Any other councillor like to talk to the recommendation? I'll take that as no. I'll put the recommendation to a vote. All those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you. The recommendation is carried. Councillor Bussell, would you please read out the hall and the people under the hall, please, who were accepted as the nominees?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Millawa Public Hall and Park, Julie Hurrigan, Carolyn Trethowan, Judy White, Maureen Tidcombe, Leanne Finnegan, Graham Wilson. Moyu Memorial Hall, Graham Batten, Lloydie Batten, Neil Jarrett, Maxwell Baker, Alan Sampson, Josie Sampson, Peter Shanley, Travis Wright, Nerida Johnston. Myrie Memorial Hall, Carol Knert, Liz Meyer, Sandy Dool, Catherine Fox, Paul Coulis, Anne Lacey, Jeff Lacey, Sharon Jarrett. North Wangaratta Sports Reserve, Dennis Powell, Kevin Hogan, Joe Caruso, Michael Glenister, Philip Smith, Colin Crittenden. Oxley Shire Hall, Janet Heath, Don Heath, Claire Cowdrey, Jason Mullins, Christopher Kalkulka, Melody van der Hayden, Neil Barclay, Neil Brock, Lee Coles, Barbara Gotti, Erica Pyle, Wendy Richardson, Alison Stevens, Graham Stevens, Bruce Ubergang, Sally Day, Eldorado Memorial Hall, Manny Teneray, Bowman's Mamungi Hall, Bowman's Mamungi Memorial Hall, Mary Ferguson, and I'm sorry to a couple of those people if I mangled your surname. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Harry. Thank you, Director Chubb. We'll move to item 14.1, corporate services, financial policies at 14.1. Thank you, Director Sarah Brindley.
Thank you. So the new Local Government Act 2020 requires Council to adopt a suite of finance policies that give effect to our financial management principles. The policies essentially set out some of the bounds within which we will operate and require us to report and give transparency if we ever propose to go outside those bounds. The 4 policies are up there on the screen, but the recommendation is that Council adopts the borrowings policy, investment policy, budget variation policy and reserve accounting policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Brindley. Can I have someone move the recommendation? There's no public questions in relation to this policy. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Fitzpatrick, and seconder Councillor Fuller. Councillor Fitzpatrick, do you need to talk? Would you like to talk on this? No. Would any other councillor like to talk on this policy? Councillor Herry, please.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. I must say I have some reservation, mainly regarding the investment policy document, particularly with respect to page 2 in Council's own direct investment guidelines, the hierarchy, where it lists as item 3 the investment return ahead of item 4, a socially responsible investment. I think it would be prudent to consider the full social ramifications of how we choose to invest our money and consider adjusting the hierarchy to pay respect to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herry. Would any other councillor? Councillor Grant, please.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually agree with Councillor Herry. We need to, obviously have a social overlay, but we also need to be prudent in terms of the way we invest our money, and by that I mean prudent in that what money we do invest actually benefits the rural city of Wangaratta and our ability to continue to provide services and assets to the community.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Any other councillor like to talk on the recommendation? Councillor Fitzpatrick, you don't want to end off there? Okay, thank you. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All in favour? The recommendation is carried. Thank you. Can we move to 14.2, which is the 2021 Community Satisfaction Survey results?
Thank you. So this is an annual survey that's undertaken via Local Government Victoria via an independent market research company and participated in by many of the councils across Victoria. It's an important survey. It lets us know how the community feel about how we are delivering as a council, the things that they see as most important, where they feel the performance of council is, and any areas where they particularly want us to improve. The results, I'm pleased to report, in this year's survey have been incredibly positive. So we've had across the seven, I think, core measures, our highest ever score in the past 10 years, and the remaining one just matched our highest ever score in the past 10 years. Particularly improved scores in waste management, customer service and sealed roads. Waste management is also reported as the service which the community values the most highly. So to hear the feedback that we are improving and doing well as it's highly valued is very encouraging to hear. Areas where the community has identified they'd either like us to do better or consider doing more are parking facilities, building and planning permits, and then community consultation. And whilst they've given indication that they're feeling that we're doing better with sealed roads, also feedback to keep doing more with sealed roads. So that's kind of the highlights of the report. The full report is attached for anyone who cares to read it. And the recommendation is that Council notes the results of the 2021 Community Satisfaction Survey. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is a little note and a question coming up in another question down there that will highlight some points in that there as a point, but we'll get to that. We'll notice when we get to it. But I will ask for a mover of that, please. Councillor Fuller and Councillor Fitzpatrick again. Would any councillor like to talk on the satisfaction survey? Take that as a great no. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Thank you. I'll move on to infrastructure services and item 15.1, C30670, the drought bore infrastructure stage 2, and I'll refer to Director Marcus Goonan. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. This report is presented to Council to provide information on the evaluation of tenders and the award of the contract for the drought bore infrastructure stage 2. This includes the supply and installation of infrastructure for 8 new drought bores throughout the municipality and the upgrade of 2 existing bores. The funding for this program is provided through the Drought Communities program, and the works include the installation of tanks, pipework fittings, solar pumps, solar array, standpipes and associated items. The recommendation is that Council awards the contract for the drought bore infrastructure stage 2 to Gordon Gibson nominees, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to sign and seal documents when they are available, and discloses the contract price.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. There was no questions in relation to this from the public, so I'll put the, for a mover, Councillor Bustle, seconder, Councillor Grant. Councillor Benton was the mover, and Councillor Grant was the seconder. Sorry, Brendan, note of that. Councillor Benton, would you like to talk on the recommendation?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think this decision to do these bores has been a magnificent result for the resilience, not only for the rural community, but the whole community, particularly in relation to firefighting. To have these bores put there and the ability for the community to be able to become more resilient, which is being pushed more and more by the governments above us, and it's been a long time coming, and it also it does some way into the strategy that we were working on in relation to water security, and I've recommended thoroughly to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Councillor Bustle, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I must say, this is one of the best projects that I think we've ever done in 120 years in the rural city of Wangaratta. To be able to deliver clean water to all, after more than 100 years, there are still some of my constituents that don't have clean water that town people take for granted. We need our rural people to be drought-proofed, and this is a good start. I must say, well done to the staff for this work. It's very, very well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bustle. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just echoing Councillor Benton and Bustle in regards to the work that went behind this. It's great to see it actually come to fruition after the time that's been put in place. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask a question of Director Goonan. Director Goonan, I see in the tenders received there was 2 Wangaratta companies, which is great. There was a 3rd company, Civil and Earth Australia. Could you give me any direction where they're from?
I don't actually know, sorry, Mayor Rees. I will find that out. And
sorry, that's all right. I was just for personal knowledge there. And our time frame in relation to these bores being put down?
Yeah, so the first stage of this project is being undertaken at the moment, which is actually the drilling of the bores. So depending on how that goes, will really depend on how long the project takes. We do already know that there is some delays with some of the material that are going to be needed, such as tanks and things like that for this project. But we would expect that this would be completed by the end of October, so before the drier period of the year.
Great, yep. Oh, they look like they're from Echuca. Thank you. It's good to see local tenderers tendering for the work and getting it there. Councillor Benton, did you want to finish off? Are you okay? Okay, so I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Councillors, all those in favour accepting, the recommendation is carried. Refer back to Director Goonan for the contract price.
It's $481,050.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to Development Services and Director Stephen Swart, and we'll move to 16.1, which is the Visitors Services Strategy. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. This item's about Council's final draft Visitor Services Strategy. The draft strategy aims to improve how information is provided to visitors. Council endorsed the draft strategy in April for public exhibition, and as a result of that process, we received 12 submissions. A summary of the submissions received and officers' responses are attached to the Council report. Relevant amendments have been made to the draft strategy in response to these submissions, and an amended final draft strategy is presented to Council for adoption tonight.
Thank you, Stephen. Before I go into councillors to move and second the recommendation and move forward with response, there are a couple of questions from the gallery or from concerned citizens, and I'll read these out, and Stephen, and look forward to your response. I submit this question to tonight's meeting, and this is from Cassandra Pollock. Should the Visitors Services Strategy be adopted, it will eventually result in the loss of the current historic building on Murphy Street as the rural city of Wangaratta run public space and the shutting down of a valued community exhibition space. There will be negative consequences that will result from the adoption of this strategy. Number one, to be fully transparent, shouldn't these losses be stated clearly in a strategy that is placed on public display for comment? And question two, shouldn't these impacts be described within the section on implications in the executive report? It would fit under the section headed social implications. Stephen.
Thank you. The key purpose of the strategy was to review Council's visitor services and to assess the changing trends of how visitors are accessing and interacting with information sources. The report finds that visitation numbers to the current Visitor Information Centre in Murphy Street has steadily declined over recent years and identifies an opportunity to improve visitor services in response to the changing needs of visitors. The draft strategy placed on public exhibition clearly recommended the relocation of Wangaratta's Visitor Information Centre to a council building in the Arts and Cultural Precinct. This provides an opportunity to provide more focused, effective and sustainable services. The full implications of this action for the existing location at Murphy Street are not known at this stage, as the building is owned by state government and council leases the space. The ongoing use of the building in the future would be at the discretion of state government. And an action has been added to the draft council plan to investigate opportunities for community exhibition space in the future.
Thank you, Stephen. The second question is from former councillor and Mayor Ken Clark, OAM, as the Honourable Secretary for the Wangaratta Chamber of Commerce. Dear councillors, the Wangaratta Chamber of Commerce are pleased to congratulate the City on its magnificent effort in the Community Satisfaction Survey of 2021, in which there were significant improvements in the operation of our waste management, sealed roads and customer service, leading to an overall improvement of 4 percentage points. Given the COVID-19 pandemic, the staff deserve praise for their efforts. We also note the recommendation to adopt the Visitor Services Strategy, and whilst the Chamber are generally in agreement We are disappointed that the recommendation is for the Visitor Information Centre to be located within the Arts Centre complex. Page 23 of the agenda says that of the 12 submissions received, the key feedback was about the provision of long vehicle parking. In reading the attachment of the project by Urban Enterprise at page 13 of the report, it indicates major information is more relevant and useful if it comes from someone like-minded. Grey nomads are the main users of visitor information centres. We are also disappointed to read at page 14 of the report that the current official visitor's guide needs an update. It interests us that whilst the report indicates that persons over the age of 55 make up almost 50% of day trippers and 37% of overnight visitors, we have considerable knowledge that visitor numbers at the VIC are dropping, and we are not surprised given that it is the elderly, many with caravans or motorhomes, that will not attempt to stop in Wangaratta. At page 24 of the report, older couples are the most common travel group type in the rural city. The analysis of current servicing models as part of their key findings on page 34 of the report, another key issue identified includes the lack of parking available for long vehicles in proximity to the centre. Council, a couple of years ago, after representations from the Caravan Club and others, recognised the need for the city to install a dump point, which was installed at Swan Street, for travellers to utilise, and we believe that this location is an ideal spot or for future of the Visitor Information Centre, given that statistically it is older travellers who will make the use of the facility such as a VIC. We thank you for the opportunity to put your comments to Council. Yours faithfully, Ken Clark. Stephen Swart.
Thank you for the question. In response, I offer these comments. The draft Visitor Services Strategy recommends the relocation of Wangaratta's Visitor Information Centre from the current location in Murphy Street to a council building in the Arts and Cultural Precinct. This helps to achieve one of the key directions of the strategy, to then decentralise physical visitor information services. This is about going to where the visitors are. Council had previously assessed the location of a visitor information centre at Warina Park as part of the consultation for the Warina Park Master Plan development. It was not considered viable in the adopted master plan. Locating the visitor information centre in a council building in the Arts and Cultural Precinct provides an opportunity to remain in a central, accessible location, while at the same time providing an opportunity to establish more focused, effective and sustainable services. Further planning work will be undertaken to confirm the exact location and form of the new Visitor Information Centre, including considering parking required, such as long vehicle parking. The official Visitors Guide requires updating from time to time to ensure the information contained in it is relevant. The official Visitors Guide is currently being updated to move to an improved format, focused on visitor information needs and including all businesses listed on the Visit Wangaratta website, which was not previously the case. Work on updating the official Visitors Guide is currently underway, with plans to release it later this year.
Thank you, Stephen, for those responses. So, councillors, I'll put the recommendation for a mover. Someone can thank you, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Grant, as a seconder. Councillor Fuller, would you like to talk on the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in regards to the question regarding the exhibition space, there's nothing to suggest that in the future, given the right consultation and work with the relevant agencies, that the space could be utilised by a community group to create a little arts hub or something to that effect in the whole space, so it could in fact increase their exhibition space potentially given the right process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Any other councillor like to talk to the recommendation? Councillor Benton?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm afraid I'm going to have to struggle with this one. I cannot see and am yet convinced how we're going to improve the visitation centre by putting it still in the CBD area. It is going to impact on the traffic flow. I can't see if you're going to have a school crossing of one way or the exit of these long vehicles getting out, people that are semi-lost driving around. It doesn't do anything in relationship to long parking. We've already had a survey telling us that one of our problems is parking. To increase the long bay parking, we're going to really have to start looking at disappearing some of the angle parking or putting it places where people are going to park and cross the main road. The entrance would have to come around Ford Street. We have a congestion period there now at some times through the day that banks the traffic back to about nearly down to Kmart. And I'm afraid I really don't see that the proposition was to put it there is going to alleviate any of the problems we already have. So I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Councillor Grant, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and mindful of Councillor Benton's comments. I don't think there is in the CBD a perfect place to locate a VIC, but perhaps located in the arts hub and with suitable parking, I think we could actually make it work. This is a step forward. I think one that has reflected the way that tourism or people are travelling and the sort of information that they're seeking. Tourism's an important economic driver in the rural city of Wangaratta. And we need to ensure that we do provide our visitors with information. But I think, importantly, I think we need to make that a personal thing too. Not everything can be done virtually, and I know that the report talks about people obtaining information virtually, but I think, importantly, there is still that strong connection with people, and I think we need to, somehow maintain that and develop it into the future. COVID's changed tourism quite considerably and probably forever. But I think it's important that we continue to focus on attracting visitors. We've got much to attract them: cycling, Ned Kelly, wine and food, our events, our environment are all big draw cards. And I think, with tourism, it behoves us to be responsive to the market, and the market's constantly changing. And I think with the VIC, it's not anything that it's not going to be an easy decision to finally locate it somewhere. But I think signage, parking, all those things actually contribute to how people use the facility that we have. So I certainly support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor Herry.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. Just to follow on perhaps from Councillor Fuller's comments with respect to the question regarding the loss of a community art space, I do wonder with the title of the Visitor Services Strategy whether it was necessarily particularly apparent that this adoption of this strategy would remove the Visitor Information Centre as it currently is, and obviously that would necessitate the loss of the community art exhibition space. I think it is an important consideration because in this town we definitely do have a limited number of places where artists can go to publicly exhibit their work. There obviously is the Baines Gallery and a number of others, but the offering in the Visitor Information Centre as it currently stands is somewhat different to those other offerings and provides a different exhibition space. So I just think we need to be mindful that we are taking away that service to our community if we do choose to adopt this strategy, which indeed recommends moving the Visitor Information Centre. With respect to parking, I think long vehicle parking is indicated as one of the recommendations in this strategy if it's adopted, and if it's placed in the Arts Centre as the strategy recommends, that is going to be a consideration, and increasing the long vehicle parking would necessarily need a decrease in other forms of parking around that area. So we need to be mindful of that as well. And finally, maybe just jumping back to a point raised by Cassandra's question, I do concede that the social implications around the removal of that function of that community space probably could have been spoken to in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herry. Councillor Bussell.
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to make a point here. In the background report, number one, decentralising of physical information centres. I think that's the important point here, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. I'll also talk on the visitors' strategy. I think the moving it to an arts precinct and having it still very central is super important. There are also a lot of elderly people, as former Councillor Clark pointed out, that don't travel in caravans and stay in hotels in the CBD area and will need to walk to these centres more so. As a caravaner, and I'm in that 50 age group that Councillor Clark talked about, that caravans around regularly. We never go to a visitors information centre, whether they're out on their own and there's caravan parking or there's not. We pull into a caravan site because we've researched the town. We want to stay in that town and then we walk around the CBD. I think we've got a great caravan park in the heart of town, and I encourage visitors to come and park there and walk up the street and visit the visitors information centre where it may be, or the hubs, including our art gallery and precincts around our CBD. And I think that would be more apparent and would also attract the people who aren't caravanning, whereas I believe a lot of those elderly people won't stop at visitor information centres who aren't caravanning. So I agree with Councillor Grant on that. And as far as parking goes, well, I certainly wouldn't be in favour in taking any more shorter parks out to allow for longer vehicles. There's already a number around town. Maybe they should need to be better signposted and better marked on Visit Wangaratta websites, etc., on where they are, and they can walk the CBD and people can spend their money in Wangaratta and walk to a suitable area for lunch and dinners and still have their caravan in the street. So I support the recommendation moving forward. So I'll go back to Councillor Fuller. Would you like to finish off, Councillor Fuller, as the mover? You're okay? I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? The recommendation is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Director Swart. Could we move to 16.2, the Draft Environmental Sustainability Strategy, 2021 to 2026?
Thank you. This item's about Council's final draft environmental sustainability strategy. The draft strategy aims to protect and invest in our environment, natural assets, and the health and well-being of our community. Council endorsed the draft strategy in February for public exhibition, and as a result of that process, 31 submissions were received. A summary of the submissions and officers' responses are attached to the report. Relevant changes have been made to the draft strategy in response to the submissions, and the amended final draft strategy is presented to Council for adoption.
Thank you, Director Swartz. There is no questions from the public, so I'll put the recommendation for a mover. Someone move to put it onto the table, please. Councillor Fuller, and a seconder, Councillor Irene Grant. Councillor Fuller, would you like to talk on the recommendation? No, thank you. Would any other councillor like to talk? Councillor Benton, would you like to talk, please?
Yes, Mr Mayor. In reading this report, and I've read it several times and been a part of some of the submissions that have come into the draft comments, I just hope to God that this document does something to stop the polarisation that's happening within the community, within climate change and the environment. The other thing that I'm going to point out is that environmentally, and I know it's been said that council are going to have to punch above its weight and it's got to show leadership. I think we're showing extremely good leadership in this council, because at the moment we're spending 17.38% of the figures on the environment, and that's holistically on the environment. You can break that down and put it into parks and grounds and whatever. But when you look at it, the rates income, that's a third of our rates raised. So every 3 years we're paying our entire rates on the environment. So that to me tells us we're punching well above our weight in relation to the environment, and that means climate change. I think we have to have some sort of a document like this because of the new act that's got a climate change policy attachment or an insert into the new act, so we've got to have some sort of an environment guideline. But I think anything we start to do, Mr Mayor, in relationship to this has got to be done with a triple bottom line, meaning that we must evaluate where we're going in relationship to environmental expenditure and make sure it is of value, not only economically but socially, but also to the environment. But if we start to get those out of order, it's not going to be sustainable. The other thing I'm going to bring back to a very sort of, it's probably a personal issue with this is the first document, after 10 years of asking, we got support for this council to give us support, is in relation to the CALP Act, which is the Catchment Land Protection Act, with the discrimination that is in that act between public lands and private lands, where people that are on private lands are enforced to do works where the public land managers aren't. And we get every excuse from public landowners why they can't do works because they've got no money or whatever. But if we can't get some sort of action in relation to that being equalised, where both parties are treated the same, because there's a submission after submission was about biodiversity. And the actions that are out there in the public lands now are absolutely out of whack. If you want biodiversity, you're going to have to start to have a look at what actions can be taken on public lands if you're going to keep forcing private landowners to do works and not do the works yourself. I don't think you can be judge and jury, plus run the act, plus push it back as a public landowner or public land manager. So I'll leave it at that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. Councillor Herry, did you want to talk on the recommendation? Is your name that you might have wanted to talk?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Rees. Indeed, in the budget snapshot, it does indicate 17.38% of funds go to environmental purposes. I've expressed my concerns with respect to the way that is represented with this group. Obviously, that includes maintenance of sports grounds, parks, planting of flower beds in roundabouts. So I'm not quite certain that that sort of work necessarily speaks to the scope of this strategy or environmental sustainability in that way. I guess I've expressed some concerns with the draft document in the past, back in February. At the endorsement of the document, I still believe those concerns have not been addressed. They were largely in relation to carbon emissions with respect to council's corporate emissions and particularly the targets in that space. There has been some work to strengthen the resolve, including a stipulation that a recognition really that these are minimum targets, and that we will strive for more where possible, obviously with the asterisks indicating that we'll seek information from a future carbon reduction action plan. However, nevertheless, I feel like the community engagement and consultation around not only this document but also the broader engagement for the council plan and vision has definitely asked for leadership in this space. And as it stands, I don't feel that those targets demonstrate that leadership fully. I think 50% renewable energy target by 2025 is too low. Just a number of weeks back, 46 councils signed on to the Victorian Energy Cooperative, and many of them, most of them, the majority, are now purchasing 100% renewable energy. So we're aiming to do half of what they've done. A few weeks ago, we're aiming to do half of that in the next 5 years. It just doesn't seem like we're putting ourselves forward as leaders. So I think I'll leave it there, Mayor Rees.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, Irene, I might go to Harry first. He said his buzzer going. Councillor Bussell.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just got a couple of points here. Page 10, referencing unsustainable agriculture practices. I think it is a bit overstated without, in the next breath, talking about our great farmers and all the extra trees we have in some places. Page 15, poor soil health is clearly overstated from a farming point of view. our land is managed very well and our soils are not becoming more acidic. In fact, the reverse is my experience. Just a couple of points I think needed to be mentioned in support of our valuable farmers that do such a fantastic job here, but I will support the strategy. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. Councillor Grant.
Yeah, can I just perhaps make a point before I speak to the motion? Councillor Herry talked about we should be doing more than what we're doing in terms of what other councils, that we're only aiming to do half of what they're doing. But I guess there's an assumption being made that they will actually in fact achieve the targets that they've set. I think we really need to be very wary of setting targets without actually understanding what these actually mean to our community practically and financially. And I think there's been an extraordinary and a lot of work done in this process. We've consulted with the community. We've heard a broad range of comment from the community. But I think overwhelmingly there is an expectation that we will act, and we will act decisively, but then we will also act in a way that reflects what's possible and what's financially possible. I mean, there are things that need to be done in terms of addressing the urgent climate change, but many of these are beyond a local government such as Wangaratta. But having said that, we still need to drive the change, and I think this strategy actually allows us to do that. The 6 pillars that have been identified, I think, are comprehensive and look very broadly at what the issue is and what we need to do. What the ESS also states, and I think what I think is important, is that we've all got to work together on this. We can't do this by ourselves. The community can't do it by ourselves. This is a partnership that we've got to be committed to and one that we've got to work towards. And it's not something that is actually set in concrete. I mean, there's, targets are there to be reviewed, and I think that's something that we need to do as we move forward. I think, the strategy's got to be more about, or not just about feel-good statements or ideals. It's got to be about what's practical and what's possible and what we need to do to actually make a difference. So I support the ESS, and I also support our council working to ensure that it is something that is a living document and one that we continue to work at and improve and achieve some benefit to the community as we move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Good comments. Councillor Fuller, Councillor Fitzpatrick, did you have anything to say? No. Councillor Fuller, did you need to end off as the mover?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the past, we've been asked about declaring climate emergency, and I, at the time, spoke in regards to not doing so on the basis of being resourced and doing it in a measurable and meaningful way. I think this document puts us on the right path towards doing that, and we can strive to a greater leadership. We can strive to work better with our community, and we can strive to do more work with our farming and private and public land owners in order to achieve a lot of these goals. This is a guiding document to start the process, and I appreciate that the amount of work that's gone into it is a great starting point for us. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. I'll put the recommendation now to the vote. All those in favour of accepting the recommendation? The recommendation is accepted. Moved. Thank you, Director Swart, for your input there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming towards the end of our meeting. Items 17, 18 and 19, there are no items there. There's no urgent business, but there is public question time, and there is one question that I will read to the public. So this is a question to the CEO, Mayor and to councillors from a Mrs D. Myra Deeming. I would like to submit the following question to be read out and answered during the public question time during July 2021, which we're happy to do again, but we've got the question now. We thought we may as well read the question in the June meeting. Under the Victorian law, it is legal for local government councils to provide sex-based targeted services and facilities separate to gender identity-based targeted services and facilities. If not, why not? For example, can we legally put signs on a set of public toilets declaring that it is one is for biological males, including males with an intersex condition. One is for biological females, including biological females with an intersex condition. And one is for people with transgender identities of any biological sex. If not, and why not? So a response for Mrs. D. Myra Deeming. Council provides certain services and facilities, such as public toilets, in order to enhance the usability and enjoyment of public space for the entire community. The Victorian Equal Opportunity Act of 2010 says that it is unlawful to discriminate against any person in the provision of such services because of their gender identity. Currently within the municipality, the public toilets managed by council are signified as male, female and unisex disabled toilets. Following the Gender Equality Act of 2020 coming into force, many organisations are now further considering how best to provide facilities for both employees and general public in the most inclusive way possible. The Human Rights and Equal Opportunities Commission promotes the consideration of transitioning to all gender bathrooms and/or having a mixture of all gender and women's toilets, where women's toilets would be reserved for both cisgender and trans women, should women's safety be a concern. The rural city of Wangaratta Council believes that access and inclusion is fundamental to creating a healthy and cohesive community where all community members feel included in social, cultural and political life. Council's position on inclusivity was further strengthened by the passing of a notice of motion in March 2021, which included the establishment of a diversity and inclusivity reference group. We will invite the group to consider this matter and provide Council with its recommendations. Council will also be developing a gender and equality action plans as part of our implementation of the Gender Equality Act. These action plans will be set out to ensure all community members live in a safe society with equal access to all community facilities. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our meeting for June 2021, the end of the financial year for this one. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday for, next Monday, on Monday, where we have a special council meeting for hopefully adoption of our council budget and community plans. So we look forward to seeing you there online. Thank you, every councillor here. Thank you to our corporate management team. And